And welcome to True Talk on WMNF 88.5. Today is Thursday, May 28th. It's still our Eid holiday, which started yesterday, Eid al-Adha. And the greeting for that is Eid Mubarak or Eid Adha Mubarak. I want to wish my co-host a happy Eid and a blessed Eid. Welcome, Samar Jarrah. How did you observe your Eid holiday, which was yesterday, which also marks the Hajj, which is a annual pilgrimage that happens where Muslims from around the world go to the Mecca in what is now called Saudi Arabia for this Hajj, and it is one of the five pillars of Islam. So, for those that don't go to the Hajj, we celebrate here and we celebrate in our homes, and it was celebrated around the world yesterday. So happy Eid to you.
Eid Mubarak, Bedier, and Eid Mubarak to anyone who is listening and celebrating. Actually, I what I did yesterday was quite different. I read some Quran, uh,
Mm.
reciting certain verses from the Quran, the holy book of Muslims. But a quiet day, a lot of needed to do some grocery shopping, and I had a worker coming inside my house to do some stuff, so I wasn't able to observe the Eid prayer. But yes, the Hajj is. I think you have been on Hajj or Umrah, the smaller Hajj. I have
I
not.
have been on Hajj actually more than one occasion. So I've performed the Hajj and I've also performed what's called Umrah. Umrah is where you just simply do a visit any time of the year to the house of God, which is in Mecca, Saudi Arabia. And the Hajj happens at a specific exact time every year, and it's been going on for thousands of years.
Not thousands, 1400 years. Don't say thousands, because Lindsey Graham is the only guy who says Muslims and Jews hated each other for thousands of years, and Islam has been on earth not thousands of years, yeah, Ahmed.
Well, let me clarify that why I said thousands of years, because the Hajj actually predates Muhammad and Islam. When Muhammad came, peace be upon him, Hajj was already being performed because Hajj is not really a ritual started by Muhammad. It was actually something that is started by Abraham and his son. And this goes back to the essence of the monotheistic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And,
Old
what they
Hajj?
call, yeah, including the Hajj, it was being
But
performed.
was it called at that time the word Hajj?
I'm not sure what it was called. Maybe we can ask our guest about it. But I believe, yes, it was called the Hajj. But however, the people of, because at the time Muhammad, before he became a prophet, they had changed the rituals in a way where they monetized it and politicized it, that they were really using it to make money off of all these pilgrims. So just to back up, and really the Hajj that's being performed now, as you know, Summer, because people may think that this is all about Muhammad, peace be upon him. The Hajj is basically replicating the story and this tradition of Abraham and what he went through with his son Ishmael. And this is where a discrepancy takes place between Muslims and the Jewish or Judaism, Islam and Judaism, of who was the son that Abraham was ordered to sacrifice. And in the Quran, in Islam, we believe that God ordered Abraham to sacrifice his first and only son at the time, which was Ishmael or Ismail in Arabic. And in the Jewish tradition, they think and they believe that he was ordered to sacrifice his son Isaac. And even though in the Bible it does say that Ishmael is the first son, but in the Jewish faith and in Judaism, they don't acknowledge Ishmael as a son at all. So they say, oh, that is an illegitimate son, and that's why he is not really regarded as the first son. And the whole covenant that God made with Abraham to say that he's going to bless his progeny and that this land will be for his descendants, they justify that and say, well, that excludes Ishmael. This only applies to the descendants of Isaac, which are basically the 12 tribes of Israel. So while the Hajj is a religious thing, but it's also rooted or the whole story of Abraham and that division historically has been at the core of a political division when it comes to who's supposed to inherit that land, who's supposed to be on that land in the Holy Land. So the whole story, we can talk about that another time, but what the significance of Hajj is. But when I went on the Hajj, we are replicating the steps of Abraham and his struggles and his family, not Muhammad. Muslims are not going there to worship Muhammad or to worship the black rock or the black cube or the Kaaba, as it's called. They're there to replicate the steps and the journey that Abraham had, and it ends with this sacrifice that God had ordered Abraham to sacrifice his only son at the time, Ishmael, as a test of faith. Now, of course, it never actually happened because God stopped it and replaced that with a lamb or a sheep, and that was what was sacrificed instead. And until today, that is the tradition that Muslims replicate. And it's the only religion in the world that replicates this significant journey of Abraham and honors him in that way until the end of time. That continues. Now, when Muhammad came, he actually corrected what the people, the tribes in Arabia at the time were doing with the Hajj, and reinstated to be a true pilgrimage to remind people of Abraham. But anyway, I digressed. So,
No, no,
so
so
it is actually
now
we
it's
can
scholar.
confirm with we can confirm with our guest that comes up later if in fact the Hajj was happening before
If it was
Muhammad came.
called if it was called Hajj, but Ahmed, from now on, I'm gonna be interviewing you also as a scholar on Islam. But before I introduce our very interesting guest today, and he's gonna be with us hopefully until the end of the show. I would just want to remind our listeners that we are fundraising next week, June 3rd, for WMNF and True Talk. But also, Ahmed, we have 2 tickets that we can give away if people send an email to dj@wmnf.org. And they are for the comedian Bassem Youssef, who's going to be in Tampa, I think, sometime in October. So we have 2 tickets to give away. Please send your email if you are interested to get more information to dj@wmnf.org. But today we're going to be talking with Dr. Hatem Bazian, who is a professor in the Department of Near Eastern and Asian American and Asian Diaspora Studies at the University of California at Berkeley. He is also a co-founder of the Zaytuna Institute and a leading scholar in the Islamophobia studies and an author of several books. This is what we're going to be concentrating on, looking at the renewal of the atmosphere of Islamophobia that is taking our airwaves in the past year or so. But also Dr. Hatem Bazian is an authority on anything related to Palestine. And I have to say that I have learned so much from him when it comes to talking about Palestine. Maybe today, if we have a chance to tackle this issue, we will. But we're going to be talking about Islamophobia. Welcome to the show, Dr. Hatem. You have a very
Thank you for having me.
you have a
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam. You have a very busy schedule. I'm not sure if you're in the States or still traveling, but let's start by defining the Islamophobia as a term, who coined it, and what does it exactly mean? And then I want really to go to a poll that took place after maybe a year after October 7, where it showed that really there is no coming back when it comes to young Americans who have changed their views vis-a-vis Israel. It's not going to change no matter what Israel does, because they saw the images of genocide in front of their own eyes. The only alternative is change course and start going to Islamophobia.
Well,
So,
if we want to talk about the term Islamophobia and its history and genesis, the first entry of the term actually comes in the French context around 1908. The term Islamophobie, the French, and it was in reference to the French treatment of Muslims in North Africa and in the French colonies. And it was at the time defined as the French inimical feelings toward Islam. The French had an Islamophobic policy toward Muslim majority states that they were the colonial power. In essence, they wanted to beat out and remove Islam from the population. So they had this whole civilizational mission, and civilizational mission in relations to the French meant removing and transfiguring Islam away from the societies. So that was the early entry of the term Islamophobia. At a much later time, Edward Said, as he was writing both Orientalism and then within the same time period covering Islam, used the term in order to make a comparison between anti-Semitism at the time and Islamophobia, in a sense saying that the animosity, the bigotry, the racism toward Muslims is comparable to the history of anti-Semitism in the Western world. So he reintroduced the term as a way to discuss this rising tide of Islamophobia. This was immediately after the 1979 Iranian Revolution, where we begin to see this fixation and preoccupation on anything related to Islam and Muslims with a negative demonization approach. So that gets us into the reintroduction of the term, especially in the English language. And by 1997, we get the Rumi Trust report in the UK. It was a report that was actually on the heels of another report that the Rumi Trust did on anti-Semitism, that they began to engage in looking at the problem and the challenge of Islamophobia, and says Islamophobia a challenge to us all. So this would be the first entry of the term Islamophobia into the realm of public policy, because this was, in essence, a way to examine how Islamophobia functions within the society, whether in terms of statements that are done, exclusion of Muslims, violence and hostilities, and so on. So the report was one of the first entries into public policy circles. And from that point on, we continue to have an engagement with the term Islamophobia and various ways to research it. So the shorthand definition of what Islamophobia today would be, I would say, to use maybe the UK all-parliamentary definition on Islamophobia. Islamophobia is a hostilities toward or racism toward Islam, or a form of racism toward Islam and Muslims that tries to govern Muslimness or perceived Muslimness. So it's a type of racism as a general frame, even though there is different approaches to engage with the definition or framing of Islamophobia. So that's just like a summary of the genesis and where we are at on the term Islamophobia itself.
Okay. All of a sudden, Professor Bazian, Sharia law, you have these, let me talk about Facebook and let's say the application X, and to a lesser degree, maybe on TikTok. Sharia law is taking over America from Dearborn to New York. Then there is this talk of the Muslim Brotherhood. And then for instance, you have people like the Texas Governor Greg Abbott, Representative Randy Fine from Florida, Laura Loomer, Eyal Jacobi. All of them are connected somehow to Israel and Israeli propaganda in the West, but in particular in America. And they are, for instance, in Texas, having like meetings at school boards and local governments to ban Sharia law. Um, is this an organized attempt by Israel to cover up for its genocide? Like, for instance, the Rob site news claims that there is an Israeli foreign ministry program, like a full-fledged programs, millions of dollars allocated as a budget in order to respread Islamophobia in America, in order to counter this thing that happened to young generation on both sides, the Democratic and Republican Party.
Yeah. Uh, if we want to talk about the entry and the impact of Israel, Zionism, and the Islamophobia industry, which we need to speak of an industry, this is actually nothing new. It's been the primary engagement and stoking of anti-Muslim sentiment and Islamophobia has been operatives and those who are connected to Israel directly or indirectly. We could go back actually to the collapse of the Soviet Union and the entry of the Clash of Civilization, Samuel Huntington, with also the engagement of those who are identified with Israel, shifting from anti-communism and focus on the communist world to beginning to actually identify and look at Muslims on the one hand and also China on the other, so the Sino-Islamic alliance. So this is where we actually get the Netanyahu himself early on in his various political engagements and appointment before he was a prime minister. He was laser focused on trying to make a connection and rally the Western world to Israel's cause by framing the struggle against the Palestinians as a struggle against terrorism. So this notion of identifying Muslims or Islam with terrorism, really, it is the deliberate and consistent work of Netanyahu and a circle of influencers that he had around him, including those from the neoconservative movement here in the United States, where Israel's settlements, encroachment, and domination of the Palestinians is reshaped to say that Israel is the frontline state in confronting the threat of the Muslim world. From that point on, we could see this massive deployment of resources. In an earlier writing, I have estimated at the time, and again, this was an article I wrote in the American Studies Association Journal. I estimated that 70% of the funding for the Islamophobia industry, and this is again back in 2012, 2013, 70% of that funding comes from pro-Israel sources. So not only we're talking about the present period, but much earlier and immediately after 9/11, I would say the pro-Israel, both in the evangelicals, the Zionist communities themselves, and increasingly also the concept of Muslim Zionists, really invested heavily to try to shape the discourse about the threat of Muslim or Muslimness, which required massive deployment of resources, the demonization, the cases of having 15,000 new agents that were sent out on various parts of the Muslim community, the media preoccupation with coverage, the think tanks that begin to produce all kinds of shady materials about the Muslim threat. You have a cottage cheese industry about how to deal and stop and theorize about radicalization. So, in this sense, I would say Israel was successful, especially more so in an intense period post 9/11, to actually make its war on the Palestinians be connected to the US declaration of the war on terrorism. And what we find, especially in the Western world, that most of the cases pertaining to terrorism begin to be connected to Palestine rather than to anything related to Al Qaeda or ISIS and so on. And this continued for a long period of time. As to the drop site article that you mentioned, there was a research that was done by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, hiring Stagewell research outfit that did 13,000 survey, focus groups, engagement in across the Western world, Europe, and the United States. What the research found out is that increasingly Israel is identified among the Western world public as a state that is engaging in genocide, which means that the past 3 years, almost 3 years right now, of Israel unrelenting genocide on Gaza has already firmed up the negative standing that Israel had. And my argument is that Israel's negative standing has actually began to be the case starting from the 2015 onward, consolidated in 2021 with the whole Sheikh Jarrah and Al-Aqsa attacks. But then literally the tipping point completely shifted with this genocide. However, the research actually showed that when the Israeli spokespeople or the framing begins to engage in a threat of jihadism, threat of terrorism, a threat of the Islamists, and so on, that there is a 20-point shift occurs in public opinion, meaning positively supporting Israel. And literally within few weeks of this research becoming known, or at least the research, we begin to see this assault coming from Texas, Greg Abbott going after the Epic housing project. We see the flooding of the anti-Sharia type of attack. We also see the development or the emergence of the anti-Sharia caucus in Congress with now almost 64 members. We see Florida always, Governor DeSantis making a similar declaration on anti-Sharia, Brotherhood Movement declaration. So I would actually say that my hypothesis is that as a way to try to shift the debate from a focus on Israel's genocide, and also the failure of U.S. policy in relations to the greater Middle Eastern region, whether the ongoing war against Iran by Israel and the United States, or Israel also complete erasure right now of villages, towns in Lebanon, is that you begin to deploy this fictitious threat of creeping Sharia and reintroduce it as a way to try to shift the debate from genocide into the Muslim threat, into the Sharia threat that is present in the American society, and beginning to introduce legislations, declarations, and bills that speak of this. And that's where we see this intensification of Islamophobia that are being reintroduced, because we had a period post 9/11, even going also all the way to the early Bush administration. We saw it in the first Trump administration of ratcheting up anti-Sharia legislation, where 200 different bills were introduced nationally, where 32 states actually enacting anti-Sharia legislation during that period. So basically, they're going back to what they perceived is a true and tried strategy of intensifying anti-Muslim sentiments as a way to try to shift and pivot the debate from in relations to Israel, in relations to genocide, domestic in the U.S., failure on the Iran war, and the opposition of the Iran war, which any observer understand that the Iran war is a war that has been pushed by Netanyahu, and the U.S. entered into a war that is a war of choice rather than a war of necessity. Anyone with a clear mind understand that Iran does not constitute an existential threat to the United States, and Netanyahu and his circle of political influence wanted this war as a way to rescue and secure Netanyahu's position in Israel. So there is that dynamic. And then the debate right now in the country around affordability as a consequence of the Iran war and the increase in oil prices. Affordability domestically has become a major issue with gas prices doubling. Inflation at the wholesale level went up by, I think, 6.3%. So how to actually not discuss the critical issues at hand, you actually shift and think of the Muslim threat. I compare it to many people possibly watch the movie Monsters, Inc., meaning fear that was used as a way to fill the tanks for survival. I would say today we're using Muslim Inc., creating fear of Muslims in a way to divert attention from the fundamental issues that we are facing. Israel being an apartheid, genocidal state, United States attack on Iran, completely illegal, and also had no support domestically in the United States. Even among the MAGA, having America first by going and having Israel first and attacking Iran for Israel and Netanyahu is something also in here to be spoken about, the domestic affordability. And lastly, we should not forget, especially for you guys in Florida, the Epstein files and how also this shifts away from the discussion about the Epstein files and the fact that within the mega as well, there is a complete almost collapse of the consensus because of the cover-up or attempt not to release the information and those who are responsible. And we saw some of these consequences in the Kentucky primary with Congressman Massey, that literally AIPAC pumped $32 million to unseat him. Part of it is in relations to Israel's policy, but part of it also his insistence on exposing the Epstein files.
Which sadly shows, Professor, that money does talk in American election system and electoral system. But you touched a little bit on the MAGA and what happened to it. So it seems from what you're saying that this is, I'm not sure if you agree with me or not, but it seems that this policy of Israel vis-a-vis raising the fear of Sharia and Muslims to cover up for its genocide in Gaza and Lebanon, it is working on the government level and maybe media and the classical supporters of Israel and its organizations, but is it working with the average American? And I want to touch on the phenomena of people like Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens, but very delicately, and Marjorie Taylor Moore, because these people, I don't know if they took if they took Islam and Gaza as an excuse to go against Trump because he did not release the files, or they genuinely discovered that what Israel is doing is really a genocide and it can negatively affect the U.S.
Well, I don't know what I can speak about their intention of what happens and what, but it's very clear that there is a profound shift. And for me, I say that the position of Israel in the Western world has reached a tipping point. This tipping point is an outcome directly of Israel being identified with genocide. The fact that people, for the first time in world history, that we are actually experiencing a live stream genocide where visually people have witnessed a genocide unfolding. In the previous historical period, we might saw photographs, we might saw one video, we might seen clips here and there, a news report. This is the first instance in human history where actually the genocide is live streamed. People were getting it on the feed, on Instagram, on TikTok, on Facebook, on all kinds of social media, and also the some of even the mainstream newscasts. They had to catch up and actually report directly, even though that they were not inside Gaza, but the feed was coming out. So this is an instance where literally you have almost an iconoclastic moment for Israel standing, meaning the total collapse of this Israel as an ideal state in the imagination of the Western world. So this iconoclastic moment that have completely collapsed the standing as a result of this live stream, that tipping point has arrived. We see it also in the tipping point, which is similar to the anti-apartheid movement, when cultural producers, meaning those individuals that are within the cultural production, actually begin to identify and see that the tipping point is there and where the public is at. And we saw whether in the concerts in the UK, I think they made the BBC and the organizers of the summer concert in the UK. This is actually 2025. If I'm not mistaken, 2025, where they removed or at least did not want to broadcast some of the niqab singers because they were afraid or they did not want them to express their political sentiments. So they replaced them and they brought another singer. And that's where the singer actually not wanting to be and to be in a place where he is censoring himself. And that's where actually the statement, death to the IDF, that came out from that concert, which became a rallying point. So in here, the attempt to try to limit and control the narrative around Israel after a tipping point was beginning to be reflective in a live stream genocide, in cultural producers. And that's where you begin to actually see the impact on the mega, whether it's Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, Margie Taylor Greene. And their entry into the discussion literally is influenced by two things. One, what does America first mean for them? And again, I'm not a person that assert or accept this notion of America first, because it has a very painful history in the earlier aspect. That term itself was introduced in the early part of the 20th century by the KKK at the height of anti-blackness, anti-immigrant sentiments, and its reintroduction is highly, highly problematic. But setting that aside for a minute, that we see this tipping point that is occurring, cultural producers are identifying it, this massive censorship that occurs, the canceling discourse, and then entry into the Epstein files. And the Epstein files are very important in here, because I do think that Trump and his political entourage possibly made the fatal mistake, because they campaigned throughout their campaign about that the Democratic Party is the party that is filled with pedophilia. They are part of this elite that is engaged in the Epstein scandal. That on day one that they will release the files, and that was the campaign. So they rallied and stoked the American public, and I would also say that they definitely created sentiments in here of conspiracy theories that captured the imagination of the mega landscape. They come into office and literally attempted to do what you call bait and switch. There is no files. The Attorney General Bondi, before that, she said, "It's as soon as it comes to my desk, I'm going to release it." Patel, the FBI, there is no files. He goes and testifies. There is no names. So they literally set themselves up by raising the ceiling of the conspiracy about Epstein, the conspiracy about the file, as it relates to the Democrats, because they used the number of Democratic leaders, including Clinton and others, in order to capture the imagination of the white voting base in various parts. So this combination that we see its effects in the shifts in public opinion, and I do think Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, Margie Taylor Greene, and others are symptoms of what occurred rather than what you call a genuine transformation. I cannot say whether it's genuine or not, but what I could say is that the structures that occurred made it possible for them to enter and ride the wave of public sentiments, focused on Israel, focused on Epstein, focused on the failure of the Iran policy, failure of the America First, and as a consequence, we are having this discussion and debate.
Ahmed?
Dr. Hatem, thanks again for being with us. Dr. Hatem is a professor in the Department of Near Eastern and Asian Diaspora Studies at the University of California at Berkeley. And so this seems like a very expensive, very complex, sophisticated, multi-level campaign to what's the purpose of all of this at the end? I mean, all this, we're talking about Islamophobia today, but we're talking about, they're doing this all over the world. It's not just in America, but America is a lot. But what are they after at the end, and who is they? Because a lot of times we talk about this.
I'm specifically speaking about the Israeli government and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Netanyahu infrastructure running through the Hasbara network, right? This year, the budget that's been allocated, and it's been reported by the Haaretz, by Times of Israel, that the Hasbara budget for this year will be $730 million. This is a five-fold increase that is allocated to try to shift public opinion in the Western world away from genocide into a focus on the Muslim threat, into the creeping Sharia in the West, and now how Israel is the frontline state in defending or protecting or countering the attack on Western civilization. So it's not coincidental that Netanyahu goes around France and other places and say and Germany, that we are the frontline state in defending Western civilization. Anybody that possibly would have listened to this statement in the 18th, 19th, early 20th century would be laughing out of the room. But this is where we are. So 730 million directed at shifting public opinion. Again, if you have a product that you need to sell, this product is Israel. That has literally been demonstrated that is Israel equals genocide, and you're trying to actually change it from Israel equals genocide to Israel as the best country, the happiest place in the world. I don't know if you saw, there's an annual survey that says where are the happiest places on earth. A couple of years back, Israel actually was the happiest place on earth, and now I actually wrote an article. Maybe they could share maybe some of these oxygen canisters with the Palestinians, because if they have figured out how to be happy, maybe they could share the Palestinians in Gaza under siege or in the West Bank. And now, literally, I think last year it was the fourth state in this criteria. So, but Israel in the public imagination globally is identified with genocide, especially among the younger population, including young Jewish population in the United States. Actually, they are massively leaving the position of supporting Israel into no longer identifying with Israel as the center of their identity. Facing this, you need to throw money on it, right, in order to make this shift. Now, last year, the Hasbara budget was 150 million, which was also an increase from an earlier period, which was only 35 million, which seems that Israel thinks that throwing more money at the challenge that they're facing will solve the issue. My sense is that this will be wasted resources at the end, because you cannot undo the identification with genocide, that the global tipping point has already arrived, that the Israeli political elite and landscape, whether it's Netanyahu, Ben-Gvir, Smotrich, have already been firmly implanted in the imagination across the globe of being individuals that are no longer committed to the basic framework of equality, of justice, of peace, of coexistence, or any norm of democratic processes, including in Israel itself. Throwing 730 million might delay, might distract, might possibly frustrate, but at the end of the day, I don't think it will be successful in shifting public opinion from Israel equaling and being identified with genocide to beginning to be identified as the happiest place on earth. That's basically, for me, is the framing, is between genocide and Israel is the best place on earth, and that we need to actually promote and identify with. I think the American public, the European public, and a large segment, again, the global south, no longer identify Israel with anything other than genocide, and no matter how much money is spent to say otherwise.
So Israel has been already pushing this narrative, especially since 9/11, even at some point before that, that somehow, and even some of their leading anti-Muslim leaders like Daniel Pipes and others have said that the enfranchisement of Muslims and Arabs in America will lead to the end of the golden age of Jewish communities in America, because the more enfranchised, the more politically active Muslims are in the United States, the more they're going to demand some sort of justice in the Holy Land towards the Palestinians. And they've been, that lobby has been working against and try to dehumanize and try to paint, as you mentioned, that Islam is a threat, and that somehow, and especially after the fall of the end of the Cold War, that they depict Muslims and Muslim societies, that they're the new threat. And, Samuel Huntington with the Clash of Civilization theory, and Bernard Lewis and others, that this is the threat, and this has basically replaced the Cold War. But so that's not necessarily new, but what you're saying now is they're now, because of the genocide, that image of Israel and that image that they've been pushing out, that Muslims are the enemy, Muslims are the threat, they're on the front lines, has been destroyed. And they're trying to, again, use the old playbook, and they're doubling down on it by putting more money towards it. And by the way, the 750 million does not include what AIPAC and American lobby, Israel lobby, is spending. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, the lobbying, the political expenditure, the 501, the 501c4, the Political Action Committee. That's a domestic expenditure in the United States from political action committees and so on. This is from a foreign state, 730 million that is being spent is specifically to change and shift public opinion. Now, whether some of that money comes through indirect means to the political process, I'll leave it to researchers to actually examine whether that record's in there. The attempt to try to identify Islam as the preeminent threat and try to shape the military-industrial complex, the defense industry, the media discourse, which is heavily concentrated right now in literally 4 or 5 companies. Half of it is literally shifting to being decisively within the domain of control of Zionist framing, whether Larry Ellison of Oracle, who already have purchased CBS and is going after purchasing CNN. So literally the main outlets that promote or speak on news will be decisively amplifying Israel's point of view. But I do think it's with decisive failure, even as we watch. So that shift or that attempt starting from the early 90s till now, I do think it reached its limits. The fact that the United States have entered into wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, engaged in Syria, in Yemen, in different places, and now on the attack on Iran, that the American public is tired of foreign war interventions that cost the United States in trillions of dollars. I think, again, this is another piece that we could speak about. Trump in his campaign rallied that he will actually remove the United States from foreign wars and foreign intervention. And long and behold, literally we are seeing that bait and switch again, that United States is involved in Iran, it's back again, is involved in terms of the projects or the war in Venezuela. We're seeing right now a siege of Cuba. So far from actually withdrawing the United States of isolationist policy and recognizing the massive expenditure, we actually are going back to the same playbook. And some part of that playbook is coming directly in the service of Israel security and Israel framing. So I think the anti-Muslim sentiments, the Islamophobic discourse that are being deployed is being deployed specifically at this point because Israel's standing in the West have completely collapsed. And going back to what you call true and tested approaches, at this point, my sense is that it's no longer going to register the same type of success that's in the early 2000 post 9/11 because of almost 25 years plus on the war on terror being a complete utter failure in terms of its framing, costing between $8 to $12 trillion without showing much of it at this particular time. And lastly, that the Israel itself as a brand, no one would ask Netanyahu to be a salesman for anything. Between Netanyahu and his current government, they just don't understand that that not only the American but the Western world have completely turned sour on their bombastic lack of any respect for international law, human rights, the fact that the Israeli military have killed 172 journalists to speak of, if not only we add the journalists that have been killed in Lebanon. So that Israel as a brand is not something that anyone would identify with, no matter how much anti-Muslim or Islamophobia you could generate or how much money you throw on this self-inflicted problem, right? So I would wish that the Muslims' numbers increasing, voting is the issue. I do think that Israel have created much of its own problem because it's actually believed its own propaganda and acted on its own propaganda and no longer have the basic qualification as a state equal to other states around the world. We don't see any state acting the same way. If you want to make the comparisons, often they say, well, the Soviet Union in the earlier period conducted itself in violation of international law. But again, if we think about the basic framing of where Israel is literally no longer actually adheres to the basic qualification of what a nation state in the contemporary world actually qualifies, whether it's adherence to international law for Geneva Convention, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the Genocide Convention, the protection of journalists, protection of doctors, you name it, even the protection of education. 730 million is not going to undo what Israel already has done with its current leadership, that is no longer is reaching a level that no one wants to identify with. And we're seeing some of these dynamics across the United States.
So, again, this reputation, what you're talking about is refurbishing our reputation or fixing or distracting from it, but no amount of money is, in your opinion, going to be enough. Which leads me to ask you two things. One is, despite this very negative shift in opinion, public opinion, you still have it. The establishment, whether on university campuses, presidents of universities, boards, corporations, members of Congress, members of state houses, just the different power dynamics in the country, it doesn't seem to be in lockstep with where the public is. So individuals are getting fired from their jobs. They're getting canceled. They're getting kicked out of schools if they even question what Israel is doing. So why is that there's this huge gap, and disconnect?
The political elites are the last to jump on the trains. Similar to during the period we were engaged in the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa, the political elites were the last to actually get the memo. Literally, Nelson Mandela is about to leave the prison. In the United States, we were still in the policy of constructive engagement with apartheid. Nelson Mandela was still labeled and have in the U.S. law as a terrorist. So I think we're experiencing the same dynamics. So the fact that the political elite is still beholden should not be taken as a lack of transformative, almost titanic shift that is occurring and a tipping point that is there. I would say that we are already arrived at the tipping point, that the political elites are still dancing with AIPAC or the soft AIPAC, trying to rebrand it. They're still engaged in trying to see if they could rescue their political assets. I think this is a failed policy. And we could see it in the Democratic Party is already the shift among the grassroots, even now percolating to the early entries with the political leadership. And the fact that in a primary election with Congressman Massey, that AIPAC and Mariam Adelson collectively having to spend $32 million for a primary in the 4th Congressional District in Kentucky, that tells you that we have entered the tipping point, even though Massey's lost. But the loss of a battle, meaning that Israel declared itself that it lost the war. The war for public opinion have been lost. And Massey's loss actually is shifting public opinion further across the spectrum, because now the discussion is about who is buying our political seats. And I think this is where we need to understand this titanic shift that occurred in public opinion.
Wow. Well, this has been an engaging conversation. We actually just lost track of time because it's such a pleasure to listen to a wealth of information. So we're out of time now, but thanks so much for joining us. Eid Mubarak to you and your family. Hopefully you stay safe, and we'll have you on again. Thanks so much, Dr. Hatem Bedier from the University of California in Berkeley. Samar, that wraps up our show today. It's still Eid. It's Eid today. It's a 4-day holiday, and today is the second day. We still have today and tomorrow and Saturday, so enjoy it. Eid Mubarak to everyone. Do you have anything, final thoughts to say, Samar?
No, thank you, Dr. Hatem, for being on True Talk. And as Ahmed said, very, very interesting always to talk to you. But need to remind our listeners we're fundraising next week. So WMNF and True Talk, we will be the same time next week, Thursday from 12 to 1 p.m. Please give generously so we can stay on the air and bring people like Dr. Hatem Bazian